Welcome, friends, to the Someone Gets Me podcast. I am your host, Dianne Allen, and I am so delighted that you're here. This podcast was created because I believe there is a visionary leader inside each one of us who is waiting to be seen. In each episode of Someone Gets Me, you will hear useful tips from successful visionaries who will share their stories about how being seen has allowed them to take their vision out into the world with action. Hi, everyone. It's Dianne at Someone Gets Me. And today's interview is bound to be absolutely amazing. In fact, I already have goosebumps. We have the honor of having an amazing musician and an amazing man here on the show with me today. His name is Kenny Loggins, and we've known each other for quite some time. And every time I speak with him, we have an amazing conversation. And so today, you're going to get to hear a conversation that we have about wonderful things, about life, about spirituality, about songwriting, about being a visionary. Kenny has been in the music industry his entire life, and he has transcended so many mile markers that it's not even funny. You'll see his bio in the show notes, and I'm not going to waste our show time on recounting them all. However, what you would notice when you do see his bio is that he's written amazing rock and roll songs. He's written amazing songs that touch your heart in ways that every time I listen to them, I get tears. And he's written amazing children's songs. This man has a way of dialing into his soul and sharing that soul with all of us. And so it is with my great honor and pleasure that I say, welcome to the show, Kenny.
Thank you. Finally, we get to do this for your podcast. Usually we have our conversations that are just private. So we're going to go out on a limb on this one and see where it goes.
That's right. And it will be an amazing adventure no matter where we go.
For those of you who don't know Dianne, I guess all your listeners know you in the way I do. I mean, as a spiritual guide, but I call Dianne Yoda. So there are times where she'll talk like Yoda. I'm kidding.
That's true. In fact, a friend of mine gave me a Yoda Christmas ornament because of you calling me Yoda. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. So we have a great time together. And what I would like to start with, I guess, is letting you have some moments to share a little bit about who you are in your journey, like from the inside out. Like a lot of people, know your music and know who Kenny Loggins' persona is, but you, the man, is something that is similar and different from that. And so what would you like to share about your journey and who you are? What brings you here to this podcast right now?
Well, what's catching my attention as you're talking is that what happened to me spiritually, or was happening, was by accident. I didn't set out to be on a spiritual journey. What I thought I was doing, I now call my mind shooting itself in the foot. I thought, for me, my role models, my favorite music were songwriters who managed to tap in on an introspective level and would write stuff that I would always go, damn, I wish I'd written that. That was how I was feeling, but I didn't know how to put it into words. So I set about figuring out how to go in deeper in order to write better songs. And that meant going on a path of self-exploration. But my goal was really, my mind thought that if I could write better songs and have more success, that would make my life better. The mind wants something tangible to hold on to. So we're going to make a whole lot of money, right? We're just going to write these great songs and make a bunch of money. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to do personal work, therapy. So I started into personal therapy, and I luckily worked with a man named Jack Zimmerman in LA, who his whole approach to therapy was on a spiritual level. So that was my introduction to personal work. And then gradually, the more deeply I went into that work, the more I got to know myself, the better my songs got. It wasn't just "Baby, I Love You" anymore. It was, stuff that got deeper and deeper. I have to say, though, my spirit was always in charge of my writing. Um, Danny's song I wrote when I was 18 years old, 17 actually, was for my brother Danny, about the birth of his first son, Colin, and his marriage to Sheila. And then Return to Pooh Corner, I wrote like almost around the same time, or House of Pooh Corner rather. I wrote it almost at the same time when I was a senior in high school, about the last chapter of that book and how my graduating from high school was reminding me of Christopher Robin leaving the 100-Acre Wood. So I knew that there was a part of me that was in charge. I used to write these songs, and then I'd sit back and I'd look at it and go, did I write that? Where'd that come from? And so I became aware of the fact that there was something else coming through me. Most good songwriters will tell you they have that experience where something is moving through them. It's not channeling, but it's definitely tapping into a source of information that's beyond our intellect. And I think there's a lot of ways to explain it, but it's a feeling thing that happens. And I think feelings, and you and I could jam on this, but feelings are a doorway into the spirit. So in other words, when I'm writing a song, if I hit a chunk of music or melody or lyric, but especially melody, that touches me in a particular way, I feel it tangibly. And that tells me this thing is working. This little bit of music is working for me. Follow that thread. I think the idea of following that thread, following what Julia used to call the breadcrumbs, you just follow the breadcrumbs and that takes you to yourself. That became an underlying theme in my life. So not just in writing music, but years later, I would follow those threads, those breadcrumbs, to other aspects of my life. But we'll get there.
Yeah. Oh, yes, we will. And it's interesting because when I tap into those things with me, I get goosebumps right here on my arms, right on my forearms. And that's always the message to keep going and wherever I'm going. And I think it's true for a lot of us that have that connection or allow that emotional and spiritual connection to have a way to know when we're tapped in, to when we're following that thread, or whatever language we want to use, that there's a way to know that we're in that zone versus whether somebody's just in our head or somebody like just channeling. There's a difference in how that emotional, spiritual connection shows up. And I think for each of us is probably a little different.
Yeah. And then I think there's a certain element to it that's called the gift. And some people have the ability to go in deeper, and they don't know what it is and they don't know why, but they're just kind of born with it. And I have a couple of my kids have that ability, but they don't know what to do with it yet. And because I'm their dad, I don't get a say.
Right. Well, all of your kids are amazing. And, everybody has their own journey. And the cool thing is that they have a dad who is open and available and is aware on levels a lot of men aren't and a lot of people aren't. And so, they have a real gift, whether they see it yet or not, or however their process is in having a father leading the way that is open to going deeper and following their heart from the inside out. I think that's a gift for all of you, actually.
I like that line, following your heart from the inside out.
Yes, maybe that's what we'll title this episode.
Yeah, I like it. So after I started writing those songs in high school, I went to college. I was still writing. I had a band, but my songwriting was very sophomoric. It was, really at the beginning, I was trying to write kind of rock and roll stuff for a band. So it was very imitative. And I dropped out of school, second year of City College, and went on the road with a band called the Electric Prunes. We had a song that I did not write called I Had Too Much to Dream last night. It was a hit record for them. I was a second generation prune, and I joined when the writer and lead singer and his best buddy quit the band. And so we had only the bass player and guitar player still in the band. We toured for 1 year as Electric Prunes, and then I came back and I started writing again. I got a job with ABC Wingate as a songwriter, but I never could place any of my songs with any established artist because my vocal range was too wide, and a lot of artists couldn't sing the stuff I was writing.
So what I am wondering is, you have such a diversity in your awareness and your skill set, and even from the very beginning, where you're trying things and maybe they worked or didn't work, or you're trying to figure out how to fit it in and into the system that was going on in the different bands and things. And I'm sure you've had times where you've either been not understood or misunderstood as far as what your skill set is and who you are and what you're bringing to the table before anybody really knew who you were. And I'm wondering how you handle that.
Well, it's interesting. I've been asked lately, being as I've been at this now for over 50 years, people are saying, why aren't you in the Hall of Fame? Why aren't you in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or the Songwriter Hall of Fame? And the Songwriter Hall of Fame, I think, was an oversight, because most of my best friends are on the board of directors. And I remember a friend of mine asked Paul Williams, when are you going to put Kenny Loggins in the Songwriter Hall of Fame? He said, he's not. they didn't know I wasn't in it. But, in a way, all that stuff doesn't matter. My children care more about it than I do. But I think that the real answer to not being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is focused on a particular type of artist. And here's where we come back to your real question. That it's the James Dean, Elvis Presley, snarling boy, usually angry rebel, that they love as the quintessential rock and roller. And what happened during my time when I started writing songs from my heart, from inside, that wasn't what motivated my music. I didn't come from an angry place. I came from a searching place. You can hear it in Paul Simon's early work. You can hear it obviously in James Taylor. I've considered James the poet laureate of the country for his entire career. I met him, and he has the gift in a different way. It's so overpowering that it's so difficult for him. He has no wall. He has no filter. And everybody merges. He merges with everybody and everything, which is where his art comes from. And so one of the things I've worked with you, Dianne, as you well know, is learning how to create that filter, how to create a way to keep the world from coming in and totally blasting me open. And as a matter of fact, I'm in a new part of my evolution where my spirit is now insisting on a certain level of consciousness in my daily life that I have been able to avoid until now. Well, we'll come back to that. So yeah, that James Dean character, that is the quintessential rock and roll character, doesn't really apply to my work. My work is the introspection of, well, who am I? Where am I now? What am I really feeling? How do I relate to this situation in a way that speaks to the heart? And so gradually over the years, I stopped writing pop tunes and I started writing soul tunes. And I don't mean soul music, although I love that too. I mean that my goal was to say something that either made you laugh and dance like a Footloose, or say something that made you cry like Real Thing or Leap of Faith, where I said something so deep in your awareness that you almost didn't know it was there. And it triggers something in you that you go, oh my God, how did he know that? And it's because what I discovered was my connection to everyone, that the deeper I can go into myself, the more honesty I can bring to my music, the more people I connect with. I learned this in its simplistic form when I wrote Danny's song as a 17-year-old for my brother, because the love that I put into that song resonates for everyone. People hear it. I mean, it's a freaking campfire song now. I mean,
it is.
It's like, our children learn it at camp, but it really speaks to that simple place in each of us. And then you move forward into Leap of Faith, which is what I consider to be my most transformational record, because that was where my first marriage was coming to an end. I didn't see it coming. In the process of writing, that marriage ended. And so I have songs like, "Oh my God, why is this happening?" A song called "Now or Never." "What's Happening to Me," a song called "Leap of Faith," which says, well, I thought I was going here, but now I appear to be going over there. And the pivotal line is, "All it took was a sudden leap of faith." And I still get a rush off that, because I see me then, and I see the pain I was in, and I see that shift in awareness that happened. And I was so lucky to get to be an artist and chronicle that moment in my life in a way that very few people get to do. So if you drop into that record from start to finish, I really used it almost chronologically, that you follow this path of the artist through the disintegration of one life and the rebirth of another, and then falling in love and moving into this next phase of my life. It's such a powerful time to get to be the witness to and the artist that explores it. And so for those who are going through that time in their lives, they totally get that record. Anyone who's moving through transformation, and especially the loss of a marriage into the creation of a new one. There's a song that came in early on called "The Real Thing." I was supposed to be writing a song for my daughter's christening. My daughter, Bella, was about 1 year old. So I had promised that I would write this song for the ceremony. And my plan was just to sing whatever came to my mind, turn a tape recorder on, sing whatever came to my mind, and then write that as the christening song. And I really believed that no one would ever hear it. So it was okay to just write whatever came through. And after about 15 minutes of just stream of consciousness, this melody came through. "I did it for you and the boys, because love should teach you joy, and not the imitation that your mommy and daddy tried to show you. I did it for you and for me, and because I still believe there's only one thing you can never give up or ever compromise on, and that's the real thing you need in love." That all came through one chunk. And I had not yet decided to leave my marriage. I wasn't aware that I was going to. I knew that I wasn't happy, and I knew that I'd been working on that for a long time. And when I read that, I knew that that wasn't the song I wanted to sing at my daughter's christening. And I put it in a drawer and hid from it for about a year, until the marriage really started coming apart. And then I knew I had to write it. But it became one of the pivotal songs for the transformation of my life. And I still get letters from people who get that song, and men use that song to explain it to their children, because there's a line in it, "Your daddy doesn't live here anymore." That is gut-wrenching.
Yes, it's gut-wrenching. And that's a demonstration, I think, of how your soul knew before your human self, what was happening and what was going on, and it was already coming through you. And so by allowing it to come through you, whether you shared it as the christening song or not right then, you kept it though, and you honored that part was coming through you, and you knew when to bring it out, and you knew when it was now an appropriate reflection, like an outpicturing of what was coming through you, which I think is, amazing.
Yeah. And a lot of my stuff, on that same record, there's a song called "Leap of Faith," as I mentioned, that at the last verse is, "Highway 1, and the fog rolled out to sea. He was overcome by how it happened all so easily. And as he stood there with the moonlight on her face, he was stunned by a sudden leap of faith." That hadn't happened yet.
Right. Yeah.
But it did happen just as the song said.
That's the part that I think shows that connectedness and that gift, that the song comes through and then the human part shows up. And I want to ask you about another song that is one of my favorites, but it's also a song that I was interviewed recently on a radio show that comes out of Israel. And they asked me what one of my favorite songs was, because they played two of my favorite songs, and this particular song I named because it is one of my favorite songs. And I'd like to hear about it, because it seems like it's so appropriate for 2019, and you did not write it in 2019. And that's "Conviction of the Heart."
Mm.
That quote from that is in one of my books that you were so kind to be part of my daily meditations for visionary leader book. But that song really touches me, and I play it for people a lot. And I would just really like to hear more about that song, or how it came to be, and all of that.
Well, interestingly, that's a collaborated song, and much of the verse lyric was written by Guy Thomas, but it felt so personal to me that we wrote it together, and I adopted it and tweaked it here and there, but Guy brought a lot of that into me. And to me, it chronicles the course of awakening. In other words, the character, the singer in the song, he says, "Down your roads I walked alone, as if my feet were not my own. Such is the path I chose, doors I have opened and closed." That he begins to get that he's in his body, and this body is moving through this world, and he has some responsibility to be in that body. And that as he as he awakes to himself in capital letters, he awakes to his connectedness to all things, to all people, and to all things. And that's why it became an environmental anthem. The next morning after we wrote the verses, I woke up with the melody of the chorus in my head. And the chorus is one with the earth, one with the sky, one with everything in life. And in that moment, I didn't understand what it had to do with the verses. I just knew that it belonged in that song. So again, my spirit's writing the song. My intellect is trying to catch up. My intellect is going, what the hell does this mean? You know, I don't know, but it's supposed to go here. You know, so it's like a mystery novel, right? You know, at Fifth and Drucker, take a left turn, walk into a great stone building. And so I just sort of put it all together, and I'm proud to say that the next year Al Gore called that the environmental anthem, and it's kind of hung in there as an environmental anthem. That was 1990.
Yeah, and your soul wrote the song. Your head had to figure. Thank God you're as smart as you are, because you were able to figure it out quickly. What was going on? Your brain caught up relatively fast.
Well, it didn't. It took me years to understand it.
Right. But that's fast.
Years to get it.
A few years is still fast for some humans, because some of us, some people might have some of these kinds of things happening and never give themselves permission for the integration, or give themselves permission to say, okay, how does this really all fit together? And I think because you're a seeker and a question asker inherently, then whether your brain figures it out right away or not, it's going to eventually figure it out. And you're eventually going to put it together and integrate it, because you're a seeker and because you're asking questions on a deeper level.
And because I'm a songwriter, I'm trusting how it feels. My brain isn't that so demanding that it will say, oh, well, if this feels okay to you, then we'll go with it. Because musically, I just felt I'd get a rush every time I'd sing it. So I knew there's something here. I dig this song. It's an important thing. And both Guy and I were like, this is the most important song we've ever written. So this goes on the record. It doesn't matter whether I understand it or not.
I think that's a pivotal point. You should maybe replay this and listen to what Kenny just said. It doesn't matter whether you understand it or not. If it's feeling right and you're living from your heart center and you go with it, your brain may take a little while to catch up, and that's okay. I always tell people the answer is not in figuring. The answer is feeling our way through and using our brain kind of as the co-pilot, but not the actual pilot. And so that was a very good example of how it works for our betterment.
Yeah. At that time, the woman that I fell in love with, Julia, was psychically, spiritually ahead of me and became a teacher of mine. And she was the one who really woke me up to the idea of, well, how does that feel to you? I was in a relationship that was a marriage that was very heady, and before Julia. And Julia, for 6 years, was my therapist. And all she would ever say to me was, well, how does that feel? And I remember getting so mad at her one day and just yelling, I don't know what the you're talking about. I don't know what you mean by how does that feel? And later on, I would learn that that's the most important thing for me, that I'm really a feeling-based person. And that the more I give to that, nowadays I call that my heart. And that my heart leads in my life. And it's different than feelings, by the way. I think you need to elaborate that. You know, feelings can be all over the map, but the heart has a different quality. For me, it connects to joy. And to be heart-centered, to lead with your heart is something I try to teach my children. And I've kind of boiled it down to, where's the joy? What makes you feel excited to do that thing? You know, what feels like fun? And I've had debates with men. Men have a lot of trouble with that idea. You mean it can be that simple? You mean all it has to feel like is fun? I'm not talking about getting drunk and hanging out with your buddies. That can feel like fun. That's not the fun I'm talking about. I'm talking about when a part of you really wants to be an animator, but your parents have told you you've got to be a lawyer. And so you're in school and you're studying law and you're kind of hating it, but you're doing what you think you're supposed to be doing. How often do we get caught in that trap? But in the meantime, you're drawing these incredible drawings and you're getting better and better at what you think could be animation. And so for my kids, I say, okay, where's the spark? You want to be an animator? Let's figure out how you can do that. Because if you do what brings you joy, that's going to support you. Just keep getting better at it. Drop into it. Find out where that takes you. I have a son who, at 35, he decided he wanted to be a stand-up comedian. I know a whole lot of people who would have said, you're fucking crazy. What are you going to do that for? But I believe that that's where his spark was. That's where the joy was. So let's go there. Let's find out. Let's treat it like college. You know, take classes, learn to write comedy, learn to do stand-up, learn to do improv, and see where that takes you. It might just take you to meeting the woman that you're going to marry and have children with. And you may never actually stand on that stage and do, you know, stand up for money ever. It doesn't matter. Just follow the spark.
Yes, that's so true. Following that inner joy and that spark, I teach everybody that joy is our natural state, and that's that heart center. Feelings are just the energy source that tell us we're alive, and they live on a sine wave. So they're always up and down and moving along. And it's more important to be connected to that joy heart center and go from there, which you just said, following your spark, because that's where that inner truth is. The feelings can go all over the place. Like people tell me sometimes they get afraid. And I'm like, well, fear is just telling you to get ready. And most of the time, the fear is telling us to get ready for the amazing thing that's being delivered to us. But we have to be willing to receive it to get there. And so I think we live in a
That's
system.
tricky. That's tricky. That's tricky water to navigate.
It is tricky. It is very tricky. And that's why I think it's all this spiritual, emotional way of living is kind of like an ongoing paradox. It's tricky, that has a lot of moving parts. That's why I believe it's more of an art sometimes, you know, and we all are co-creating it. So we get to create whatever it's going to turn out like you said. You know, your son may stand on the stage or he may not. It might be that leads him to meet a neat person or have an experience that then pivots him again in another way. And so being open to all those possibilities is where the magic is.
Yeah. You know, the old saying, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And it's pretty much true. Although I have to say, I probably work harder than most people I know, but I love what I do. So am I really working? I'll tell you, my first job was as a box boy at Vaughn's Market. That was working. I got fired for humming on the job. He said, you've got to stop humming. It's bothering the patrons. Like, oh, sorry. Got to go now.
Got to stop humming it. That telling you not to have music going somewhere through your being at all times it's funny today, you know, like really. Yeah. Now that's not how it's going to play out at all. But you were following your spark. You were letting that joy show up, even though it was humming while you were the box boy. You were in that flow.
Yeah. And
that's where the gift is right there. You couldn't help it. And I think a lot of people suffer a lot of existential depression and anxiety, especially men, for holding it all in. You know, they believe the lie when they're little and stuff it. until it finally creates a lot of problems in their life later.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is sad. That's funny.
But that, like I said, in my men's group, we had series of arguments or debates on the validity of following the fun. Can it really be that simple? And when it comes to, certainly when it comes to your life's work, it can be that simple. And now most of my kids are getting that. They're understanding it. And I have a 21-year-old who's following her talent as a singer-songwriter. And so the jury's out. We don't know where that's going to land, but she's loving what she's doing. And believe me, I know all the arguments. You're sitting there going, well, you can do that. You're Kenny Loggins, or you can afford to do that. You can send your kid to music school. My kid can't. But how many top professional musicians who are doing what they love had a golden paved path to that? Probably most did not. And they had to just follow that muse because they had no choice. The other big factor here, and this is something you've probably seen a million times, Dianne, with athletes and artists, no one prepares us for success. And just because I'm a good songwriter doesn't mean I'm a great employer or that I know how to work with money. What happens when you're 22 years old and you're a millionaire? That's why Clive Davis called it the emotional bends, that you go up too fast and then you're going to crash on the way down because everything must come down. And I got lucky. I met some wonderful teachers and some lucky, if you look at it from that point of view. I had people who kept me from self-immolating while I was up on the peaks of the Loggins and Messina years, and then again in the 80s when I peaked on the Kenny Loggins years. And now I'm in a whole nother place where I'm finding that the juice to be a hit songwriter has left. I'm 71 years old. I know that I'm good at what I do, but there's no market for it, so to speak, and there's no juice. I always saw myself as the guy who would keep going and just be the songwriter that's in his, back room and making songs and music that would be discovered after I leave. And apparently I'm not that guy, at least not yet, because I'm being pulled in a whole nother direction. And I find that where my juice is now is in mentoring. And so naturally, as the word gets out that Kenny Loggins wants to mentor young songwriters, I'm getting flooded with requests. Come talk to our group, come do this, But I've been working locally with teenagers here in Santa Barbara, and there's so much talent here. And I'm thinking this is probably not unique to this one spot in the country. There's probably a lot of great teen talent all around the country. But unlike most songwriting festivals or symposiums, where they teach you how to place your song in a dog food commercial, what I'm trying to do is teach kids how to write something from the heart and how to use your gift as a form of self-exploration that will then ignite something in the world. So you're not using it to preach. You're using it as self-exploration. That's with a capital S. And as you do that, you're going to spark something in somebody else. And I think that ultimately it's self-awareness that the planet is craving. And I believe artists will lead because God knows the politicians aren't doing it.
I have that same belief. And yeah, I just had this vision. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps. I just had this vision of a lighthouse. Mm-hmm. And the light that you're sharing with these teens and other people ignites in them. And it's kind of like that ripple effect of life. And I think that's an amazing amount of beauty. Wow. It's like really strong. It's really strong. Mm-hmm. It's like jumper cables. That light just, keeps waking the spark in them up. And that's an ultimate gift, not only to them to teach them that self-exploration, and also it's the gift to the world in that way, because it can't not ripple out. So I want to talk a little bit about the part where you said that you're a great songwriter and a great musician, but that doesn't mean you're a great employer and all of those things, and I think that when you also put that alongside the part that, if you're doing what you love, you're not working a day in your life. And I think it's important for everyone to realize that, I do what I love. To me, it's not work at all, though it's powerful work. I'm in the flow most of the time and I love it. And paperwork sometimes gets on my nerves. Like there's parts of the job, if you will, that aren't as exciting as the actual calling and the actual vision.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes with it. It's kind of like learning how to dance between the spiritual, emotional, and the physical 3D realm. We still have to function in this realm, even when sometimes our best work is in that flow.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're transitioning from your being in the flow, in that space where it's just coming through you, and then you have to deal with something like, driving a car or dealing with a person, like something that's just not in the flow. How do you handle that? What are some ways, or maybe you have a way that you've learned over the years that works real well for you that might help somebody else out?
It depends on exactly what you're talking about. Obviously, I have an assistant now to handle some of the mundane paperwork, as you put it, and the day-to-day stuff that comes up from being a public persona. There is a lot to do, a lot of offers that come in for not only shows, but which I still do occasionally, but I'm cutting way back on that because I'm noticing that my spirit is kind of done with the touring thing for a while. I don't know for how long. And so I've cut way back on touring and will continue to do that because I have to go with where my spirit is calling me. Now, what I'm using now is a terminology that we haven't introduced yet. But I've been talking about following my heart, and now all of a sudden I'm using the word spirit. That the two could be interchangeable, and that maybe you could help me with this. But I feel like my heart's capable of doing a number of things joyfully, like songwriting. Like I could work on a TV show. I could help you develop a play or a book. You and I talked about a book when I was trying to figure out what was happening to me spiritually.
Yeah, the book's at the editor right now. You'll be seeing it probably at the end of this week.
It's called
Lightworkers Instruction Manual.
Which was the title I gave you.
Which was the title. You called me that morning and you said, you have to do this. And I'm grabbed a pen because I could tell it was something your spirit was saying to me. And you said, you have to write a book and this is what it needs to be. And here's the title. And I said, yep, because I trust when other spiritually evolved people and people are given messages that it's my responsibility to follow directions. I don't have to judge where it comes from. So I followed directions and wrote the book.
Yeah, it's that mystery novel thing again.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
There you go.
I'll figure out later why I wrote the book, but I wrote it because it was the thing to do. I got goosebumps when you said it. I'm like, oh, that's so true. And now the book is actually, I gave it to the editor right before I went to Cuba, which I just got back. So I should be seeing it very shortly.
Yeah, terrific. I'm dying to read it. And God knows we need it. Because, you have the ability to put things into practical terms. The diet that'll help it, and the exercises that'll help it, and the ABCs of what feels overwhelming when you're in it.
Right.
What am I doing with what can I do with this? What's happening to me? And I'm in that what's happening to me moment again. I don't know why I didn't think to call you. I've been struggling with this whole physical thing. It's overwhelming, and I go kind of stupid when it hits me. My intellect is not supporting this one because I feel like what's happening to me is that my spirit is saying, okay, enough around. I'm sorry if those of you who are listening think that your spirituality takes you away from the F word, but it doesn't. It's saying, I now demand that you be in your heart 90% of the time. And activities, and I'm not talking about buying groceries, but activities that you think are supporting you or your lifestyle are no longer appropriate for you. You now have to go somewhere other. And those big leap of faith moments, they're never easy. They always fight the intellect. They're never logical. They're in what I would call the logic of the heart. They're not logic of the mind. They don't go A, B, C, D, E, and then you go here, and then that's like big leaps of faith. Just follow this thread, follow this a series of breadcrumbs. Pick these things up and something's going to happen. So right now, the best I can get out of this is that mentoring feeds my heart. It makes me feel good. I get high when I'm working with young talent. And when we really connect, I can tell them things that they've never heard before and that they need to hear. Whether they're willing or ready to take that information, I don't know, but I know that I wouldn't get it if they didn't have some version of readiness to receive it. And so it's been a really rewarding path for me. And I think that the kids that I work with always get something out of it.
Our spirit has this calling, and it's always the same calling. It just shows up differently all the time, right? So for you, it's starting to show up in a different way because your spirit wants to lead you in this other place. That doesn't mean the previous was bad or that will never happen again or you're going to stop it. It just means there's this now. And a lot of times I work with a lot of people that get stuck in the thing of, I can do anything. And so they get brain locked on overthinking, when if we breathe into our heart and let our spirit show us the road, it will open up the doors necessary to take us where we need to go. And that's, I think, that spirit logic that we're talking about, that it's about trusting that bigger picture, because yes, we're all multi-talented. We can do anything we put our mind to. It's not what can we do, it's what are we called to do. And that's where the joy really awakens in our heart, in my mind.
Right on.
And I think that it takes a lot of guts, and I think it takes a lot of courage for all of us to say yes to that higher road of the heart-centered joy that aligns with our soul.
Mm-hmm. Takes a lot of trust.
Yeah, a ton of trust, because there are times where it's really tenuous at best and shaky, and sometimes you feel like you're losing your mind, and other times you don't know which way up is, and then it seems to make sense, and then it's all over the place. And so without that conviction and that trust and that faith and everything, it can make this kind of life a lot trickier, which is why one of my first mentors said that a spiritual life is not for wimps. And I'm like, that's true. The more I live it, the more I confirm what he said.
Yeah.
You have been listening to a great conversation with Mr. Kenny Loggins. For more information about Kenny and how to follow him on social media, please visit the show notes and follow those links. Thank you so much, Kenny, for your time and your inspired ideas in this great conversation. Now remember, everyone, keep your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you. You are here on purpose with a purpose. Go out there and let your light shine. And remember, take that leap of faith. Until next time, be well.